left, right.
I don't know why we do it to ourselves, but we tend to pick topics that will piss off 50% of the people that listen to us. So if you're one of those, and there are two of you that listen to us, I'm sorry if this topic turns you off, but we do our best to introduce the topic, introduce both sides of it, and have a civil discussion. So listen on, enjoy, let me know what you think in the comments. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, it's Philly.
Cheers.
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 All right, we are live. This is SipTalk episode. There goes the cat. This is SipTalk episode 221. My name is Justin DiGiulio, joined by James, the Boswell, philanderer, philosopher,
Ladleist.
He's a man of many PHs, and he's got a cat running around the background of his video frame. So if you're watching us live on video, you will see the cat darting.
Yeah, just make peace with it. It's not going to be her last appearance.
Corner to corner of the room. Today we have a pretty interesting topic. The topic is James doing his absolute best to just get me banned off of every social media platform. So I'm going to do my best to direct conversation to where I believe it is safest. We may end up just talking about shower thoughts once again. Because
or a safer topic like the Jews.
It proves to be too controversial, but it really feels to me right now like everything that's going on in the news, conversation all over the place, it's just crazy controversial. It's right wing or left wing. So here's the topic. We're going to talk briefly a little bit more about trans, and then we're going to talk about fat acceptance. And we'll see where these two things take us. So I want to address the image that was sent to us. So for those of you who can't see what we...
Really quick, before we get to that, I want to get your thoughts on the news story of the last week. The billionaires dying in a rickety sub visiting the Titanic.
Well, that is also on our agenda. So hit me with it. It's the news that just hit this afternoon. These guys went to go observe the Titanic in a mini submarine underwater, and we lost touch with them. I don't know, roughly like 40 minutes after they departed, something along those lines. So the Titanic is over 12,000 feet below the ocean surface. These guys went down to the sub. What exactly is it that you wanted my opinion on?
I don't know. I just want. First of all, I'm sure you've seen the pictures of the sub.
I have.
Would you get into it?
So here's the thing, two things, and I'll give you that answer second. Look, I'm not. The issue is you can't feel less bad for these people because they had loads of money. Okay, and I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, fuck those guys, they deserve it, they're rich. That's being rich doesn't put you in a different category of deserving. However, it does enable you to do more things than other people can do. And there are things that, and this is to answer your question, things that I just wouldn't do. I wouldn't say, you know what, I'm feeling a little bored. I think what I'm going to do today is get on an airplane and jump off. Or, let me...
Well, that's skydiving.
That's skydiving. Fair enough, yeah. Let me, what I want to do is do some frog suit jumping, where you jump out of a plane and you sail down the frog suit and pull the parachute. Bungee jumping, not on my agenda. The kind of high risk things are not really like alluring to me. Now, this to me, it wouldn't make sense to like climbing Mount Everest. Probably like I'd like to go on a nice hike, a challenging hike, but a hike that many people die trying to do who are in some of the best shape in the world, not really something I'd want to engage in. So the idea of saying, you know what, let's go 12,000 feet below the surface, to me, not something that would ever really appear on my agenda. You follow me there?
A little bit. I think, first of all, the level of danger of these people. First of all, let's say hi to Jorge Barrios and Lisa. Thanks for joining us. If you guys want, I'm starting a ocean exploration company. I've got a garbage can in my garage that I'm going to put some tinfoil on, and then with a little video game.
You better duct tape the joints pretty well.
Oh, I got some super glue. Don't worry. But
right.
So in terms of danger, like the thing about the sub versus like bungee jumping or skydiving is like if you go to any like skydiving school or like skydiving place, they're going to be like licensed and insured, and there's safety inspections. And if there aren't, don't fucking go there. Like, but with this sub, it was like something that they just kind of made, and like they couldn't get it to pass safety inspections, so they just had people sign waivers saying we don't care about our safety. And so like it's hard to feel bad for these people, not because they're rich, but because they made a wildly stupid like decision.
Well, look, I imagine sitting underground, unconnected, stuck in a submarine that's running out of oxygen, but that's not what happened. That's what we all believed. That was the best case scenario, that for the last 4 days they were incommunicado
and they could be rescued.
And they were running out of oxygen. What it appears has happened today is they found debris that it sounds like they have identified to be parts of that mini sub. And when you are underwater, you have a great deal of pressure pushing down on you. The deeper you go, the greater the pressure is, which is why a machine that's going to go this deep needs to be constructed to withstand that pressure. And as you just said, this wasn't a certified vessel. It was something they made and signed off on that they were willing to take the risk. And unfortunately, at a certain point underwater, the vessel imploded. Now, I can only hope that it was a very fast implosion.
It would have been like if something fails,
depending on how deep they were. But I believe that they were deep enough that it probably would have happened very quickly. Although you don't know that if something failed, there could have been a very slow failure. I think it's very unlikely, but who knows?
Most likely, they died before they even knew what happened. So,
and that's probably exactly what happened.
I think the reason why you're seeing this Schadenfreude is because like there's this kind of tale of rich people being smarter than everybody else, and that's the reason why they're rich. And so when you see rich people make really stupid decisions, the people that aren't rich just like, see, they're not any smarter than anybody else. See, they can do. In fact, they're dumber than us. I think that's kind of at the core of it, is all these people saying, haha, billionaires wasted $250,000 to commit an elaborate suicide.
Yeah, I do feel bad for them, and especially their families, but it was a public,
they had life insurance, they'll be okay.
It was a public. No, they're not okay. Just because you get money doesn't mean you're okay, right? But it just seems like a public display of stupidity at a reasonably high cost, although not so much for them, and it's a shame. But yeah, that's the current news as of today. Should we move on to the more controversial image? I can throw it on the screen here.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So this was sent to us a little while ago. Let me just share the window. And for those of you who are listening to us audio only, I will describe the picture to you. It depicts a woman with blonde hair who's parked her motorcycle. She's dressed in a black motorcycle outfit, and she's helping change the tire of another fully bearded woman who's dressed up like a Barbie doll in a pink car with a bow tied around the antenna and a pocketbook-sized dog in the back seat of the car. Effectively saying, well, James, how would you describe this photo, this image? It's a sketch.
I mean, my interpretation of it, or do you want me to describe it just the way you just described it? Because like,
well, I described it. You're not changing that. But what's alarming here? Why would somebody send this photo and What's the question about it?
I don't understand the point that it's trying to make. Because
Okay.
is it trying to say like it's a bunch of confusing messages because like is it saying that trans people are less than other people because they don't know how to change a tire? Is it women don't know how to work on cars, but you've got a woman changing the tire for another woman? It like I don't think that I don't understand the point that it's trying to make. It does like
So I think the point that it's trying to make is what you're is a scenario that you would not have seen 10 or 15 or even 5 years ago. And the interpretation of it is whether you're pro-trans or anti-trans. But what my interpretation was, this is a scenario you wouldn't have seen 10 years ago. And I think a similar image of a woman on a motorcycle helping a man driving a two-door mini car change his tire would be just as telling of the times that there are a lot of men that have no idea how to change the tire of a car. Now, it's confusing because you do have a and this is where it's confusing because I'm not even sure how to say it. You have a woman who is a man dressed up as a woman, and that's where it just gets confusing because somebody in my position addressing this person would say, do you want to be called she because you're wearing all pink, or do you want to be called he because you are clearly a man, you have a full beard and mustache, but you're wearing ladies' clothes? So for me, that's where it gets a little confusing. And that's kind of where my attention was drawn to because that's kind of what people are struggling with these days. I feel like not knowing in scenarios like this what to say or do.
well, it's actually really easy. And you already kind of nailed it, which is just ask.
But it also feels very strange, and I don't think that I'm going to close this. Hopefully, it brings us right back in camera. It feels like a very strange time to be in, and I'm not saying, and I want you to listen to me carefully, especially if you're listening to this podcast. I'm not saying that I'm against it. What I'm saying is it's weird. So allow me to be uncomfortable with something new that I'm not familiar with, and let it work itself out. That's all. Instead, we get shut down from TikTok and Instagram, for even having conversations about this. Just like when we spoke about abortion and people were commenting, men have no right to have a conversation about abortion. That to me doesn't make any sense. I think, and the reason we do this podcast is so that we have a platform to articulate our thoughts. You tend to be much more liberal than I am on most subjects, but it's a platform.
I think we're pretty close on abortion, though.
I think, abortion, I think is definitely one, and I think to a degree we're in the same realm on trans. It's just you've kind of committed to the in my opinion, you've committed to the very woke comprehension of trans and acceptance of trans, and I'm saying it's still kind of being worked out, and it's strange.
I'm okay with your position of saying it's still being worked out, and we need to just kind of let things play out. I don't have an issue with that because that's not shutting down a conversation, and that's not diminishing other people's choices. And I'm also saying that it's perfectly reasonable when you see a person of any type that kind of dresses 2 standard deviations out from what most people wear, like it's unavoidable to have a reaction to it because it's not something you see very often.
Well, I was walking from the train to my car today, and it's actually, I feel like it's been all week, and I wonder if there's a convention or a concert or something going on where there's kind of like a lot of men with black and white facial makeup on and dog collars, and same thing for women. And I'm wondering if like
Kiss concert.
It almost felt like that, but different. And I don't know. It just like a guy wearing a skirt and a dog collar, but not like rad, like not
like punk rock dog collar.
Yeah, punk rock dog collar, but there was almost like a sexualized element to it. I don't know. I'm sure
there's a whole community.
Yeah, but just seeing several people this week again, but noticing, that these are, 2 standard deviations away from what you commonly see, and just remarking on it. Honestly, I wouldn't have thought twice about it if you hadn't just brought up that comment about seeing people dressed out of the ordinary.
I guess where I draw the line is where people say, like, you shouldn't be doing that in public. I'm like, well, who cares? Like,
well, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation about what should be accepted in public and what shouldn't be accepted in public. I walked through Times Square on Tuesday, and I saw two different groups. There were two pairs of women that, from what I could see, they weren't wearing anything except body paint. And I was just literally walking down the street, and I thought to myself, like, the naked cowboy wore underwear. Like, this is a bit more extreme. And where do you draw? I mean, I thought it was great. Don't get me wrong, but just, I don't necessarily know that that's
wildly depends on the level of attractiveness of the women wearing body paint.
Well, I mean, it's like if you walk into a bookstore and there's a bunch of porno mags, like, right up front without the covers being censored. It's just like, should that be here or not? Because effectively it's the same thing. We're talking about naked women with body paint and porno mags.
Yeah. So, well, and this country just has this weird hang up about nudity, where if you go to Europe, like, all the public television channels have nudity on them. It's just like, people, like, it's no big deal. It's a human body. Who cares? It's our whole Puritan foundations where, like, you have to have this modesty, and nudity and prurient sexual content must be banned. And yeah, that's just the religious extremism of the founding of this country, because who are we founded by? The Puritans. They were too extreme for the religious people of England. They were too extreme. Where did they go? Fucking here.
versus versus Australia, which
got the convicts, and they turned out all right.
So all right, I want to
hold on. Simone asks, what's strange about being trans?
Honestly, look, I live in New York City, and I think there's, because I actually, as we were talking about it, I realized I didn't really explain my perspective. There's nothing strange about being trans. What is strange is not being normal, and that's where it gets confusing, right? Because we want to be accepting, but also something that kind of stops you in your tracks. Like, I was walking across an intersection in Times Square, and I literally, like, almost paused, and I was like, okay, wait, so they're wearing literally nothing? It's just paint? I was like, is that allowed? But it made you think twice. Now, most trans people are just interested in transitioning and not showcasing their sexuality or their transition, or that's it. And some people, and what I think we're seeing more of, and this might be what's getting more attention, is people who want to exist sort of in between, like along the spectrum, not on one end of the spectrum or the other. And I think that's where the word "they" comes into play. And not that there's anything wrong with it, but it can be a little confusing for those of us who are on either end of the spectrum.
Well, and I think that's where, like, what's so strange about being trans, the answer from an aesthetic perspective is, like, especially someone who's in the middle of transitioning one way or the other, is part of the transition is that they're going to start kind of showing physical features of both sexes at the same time. So you could have someone that has breasts and a beard, and that's just not something you see very often. And so it can be strange to look at. You're like, this doesn't make sense.
So, and what Rash said was saying being normal or not being normal is controversial. You shouldn't say not being normal. But I think most people commonly understand what I mean by normal. And what I mean is within that standard deviation.
Well, and statistically, the occurrence of transgender people is about 0.3%, which is almost dead on 3 standard deviations out. So that's not normal. Like, now, there's a difference between that's not normal and saying that's not right.
Yeah, and I think that's very, we're not saying that's not right. And I think anyone can agree that it's not normal. And we're not saying not to normalize it, but but we're certainly not saying that it's not right. Well said. And then we have from Elizabeth saying, we're living in a time where we can't be
where we can be us.
Okay, all right, yeah, fair enough. I want to move on to our main topic, which I mentioned it right off the bat. Are you comfortable moving on? Have you said what you feel like we need to say about that image? And
Yeah, real quick, Elizabeth says nobody is normal, and I think that's actually correct. Is like if you take an entire spectrum of if you measure every aspect of a person, their personality, their psyche, their psychological profile, their body, and all the health conditions that they have, statistically, it's almost certain that they're going to have one rare form of something.
Not everybody's going to land on the 50th percentile of every metric. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you take the averages, in certain respects, one respect or another respect, somebody could be normal, or let's replace the word normal with average.
Yeah.
So we want to talk about, I don't know if we want to talk about this, but we're going to talk about fat acceptance. And
you want to do an over-under for how long it takes for us to get banned on this one?
I hope we don't get banned, because it's a conversation that we're just not having, and a great opportunity we had to talk about health issues with being overweight was coronavirus. Yet we didn't talk about how coronavirus significantly affected people who were overweight or elderly at a much greater rate than anyone else in the population.
Also smokers, which is not shocking.
But we didn't take the opportunity to talk about weight and health risks and its effect on our health, and that it did put people in a much higher category for being affected almost at a deadly rate by coronavirus. Raj said he'd like to say that he's incredibly proud of the way that we handled that conversation about trans. I'd like to thank him. I don't think it was difficult for us to handle it that way, but I think we did handle it well. And so far, we haven't gotten kicked off, so that's good. So I send
setting records here. We're at 22 minutes.
So we just released 3 of our recent episodes of Sip Talk on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music today. And when I was creating the episode for Shower Thoughts, which was 2 episodes ago, it was the last episode, right? Episode 220?
Maybe 2 episodes ago.
Maybe it was 219. I just Googled shower thoughts to see what types of images Google would give me. And what it did was it just gave me a bunch of actual pictures of text of people's shower thoughts. But the first one read, and again, shower thoughts are those profound ideas that hit you in the shower, and then people send them to Reddit, and this is what you get. But the first one on the list, telling a dangerously overweight person not to lose weight because they're beautiful is like telling an alcoholic not to stop drinking because they're fun. And I was like, oh shit, that's actually pretty accurate. And again, they said dangerously overweight. So we're not talking about pudgy people. We're not talking about people that are a little overweight. We're talking about people that are, and again, the word was dangerously overweight, danger to themselves, not danger in bumping into somebody else and knocking them over, but a danger health-wise to themselves. And we don't have conversations about these things. And I thought that may not be a bad idea to have a conversation. And then, James, you sent me an article who was someone who is pro-fat, effectively.
Maybe. It's hard to, I don't want to pin them down into one perspective, but they say some things that I vehemently disagree with.
So the title of the article was on NPR's Fresh Air, was Diet Culture Can Hurt Kids. This author advises parents to reclaim the word fat. And it's with the journalist Virginia Soule-Smith, the creator of the podcast Burnt Toast, among other publications. And I've highlighted, James, do you have the or shared spreadsheet in front of you? If not, now may be a good time to bring it up. I've highlighted a couple of points that she made in this article, and I thought we could kind of discuss them. Because, again, we don't want to fat shame anyone, but I do think that having a conversation about health is not a bad idea, only because it's really not happening anywhere. Do you know anyone who's, and I think it's because people are afraid of, and this is why it's tricky territory for us, of being shut down or having people kind of try to cancel them or argue with them about this topic.
Here's the issue: is the people on the fat acceptance side have done a much better job of controlling the narrative than people that are going to be, well, on my side. Where, like, criticizing people for their body weight is now... It's always kind of been taboo, but now it's even worse, where you really can't make comments about someone's weight at all, even if you're trying to point out, like, hey, losing weight would improve your health. Like, I don't even want to get into like the aesthetics of it. I don't even want to have the argument about, like, big can be beautiful, like, because I'm going to get in trouble if I talk.
Well, but from your perspective, and I'll share that. Your perspective is that you prefer a very thin woman. That's your perspective. There's some men that prefer a very large woman, and then there's some men that are indiscriminate. And also, by the way, vice versa. Some women prefer large guys. Some women prefer skinny guys. And some women have no preference. They prefer personality or money or whatever the case may be.
So, you know what my issue is? Like, I don't have a problem with, like... I have this discussion with some of my guy friends where they're like, do you think that she's hot? I'm like, no. And, like, but I don't care. Like, if you think she's attractive, I'm not the one who, like, I don't need to be attracted to her for you.
Well, also, I don't have every person. So the attractive aspect isn't really something we're going to get into, but nobody's required to be attracted to everyone else, regardless of what they look like.
So I agree with you, but the problem is, like, the fat acceptance movement on the extreme fringes of it feel that, like, if you, like me, say, I wouldn't date somebody that's overweight, the fat acceptance movement is saying you're being discriminatory.
Well, the same thing goes for the trans argument. That's, and that's
I've had people in the BLT community say you're being discriminatory because you say you wouldn't date a trans woman, and I say screw off.
But that's okay. So that's where we stand. So can we talk about some of the points of this article? So let's do it. To lead with, she says that most parents have had this situation where their child points to a very obese person and says, "Dad, look at them. They're so fat." Now it's funny that she mentioned this because this actually happened to me when I was a kid. And, according to my mom, this guy chased me around the store.
Well, I mean, luckily for you. I mean, probably got out of breath pretty quick.
Yeah, I mean, you generally, but the issue is that kids don't have a filter, and it's how parents deal with that situation. Now, again, this is seeing something that is abnormal. Now, obviously, that was the 80s, okay? This is the 2020s, where there are, and for the last several decades, there has been a much greater increase in population of people that are overweight. So it is much more common. However, it is still a minority. I think it's a minority, at least, of people who are very overweight. So
it basically splits almost perfectly by thirds, where about a third of the population is what's considered normal weight, about a third of the population is overweight, and about a third of the population is obese.
So what the author says is parents shouldn't tell their kids, don't say that, that's wrong, don't call them fat. What the parents should say is bodies come in all different shapes and sizes.
And that's somewhat true.
Well, they don't necessarily come in all different shapes and sizes. They generally come in the same shape and size, and then they grow into larger people depending on how active they are and how many calories they intake.
There's genetic components for things like height and like muscle mass and stuff like that, where, like, if you've got the genetics and you're 5'3", there's not really much you can do to change your height short of having really painful surgery.
Okay. I think just saying bodies come in all different shapes and sizes may not be the biggest take-home lesson. I think there might be a conversation to be had There might, and again, it depends on if you're dealing with a 4-year-old or a 12-year-old, but most likely you're dealing with a 4-year-old where the conversation can't go that in depth.
But I actually think like telling parents not to say to the kid, "Don't say that. That's wrong." I think that's actually okay. In saying like, and bodies come in all shapes and sizes is also somewhat true. But like, you have to recognize that like at a certain level, and the science is kind of out in terms of like at what point of being overweight does it become a health risk, because some science says like even being mildly overweight is pretty bad, and other science says being mildly overweight is fine. And then like where do you draw the line of like how overweight do you have to be for there to be a scientific consensus of this is bad for your health? You're going to get a bunch of different answers if you look at the research.
So, but no, so you disagree with her saying that it's wrong to say, don't say that. That's wrong. You think parents should say, don't say that. That's wrong.
No, I
think.
No, I'm saying that like her saying like that the parents shouldn't say, don't say that. That's wrong to the kid. I'm okay with that. Like you could like letting a kid say, look how fat that person is. Like just saying to the kid, don't say that, probably isn't the best. But you could use it as a time to talk to the kid about how do you become fat, and depending on the age of the kid.
I think you're dealing with a 4-year-old. Dealing with a 4-year-old, the conversation that should happen is we don't want to make people uncomfortable, and you shouldn't point and say things about other people. I think that would be the conversation. You know,
sure,
not necessarily they're wrong to draw attention. I don't think that's so.
And so
look,
like
the next point that she makes.
Okay, go ahead.
The next point that she makes is that parents are being given a hard time because people are saying that a child's body size is the parent's fault, and what she's saying is that a child's body is not the parent's fault. And I would say that parents generally have the biggest role in the body size of their children. I'm not talking about short or tall, but I'm talking about I'm talking about a child being overweight, and you kids that were fed pasta that they would only eat if they could see the butter.
Yeah, it had to have so much butter in it that by the time the father stopped adding butter, the pasta had cooled to the point where the butter wouldn't melt.
Effectively, yeah, they wanted to see the butter, and I think that was more in control of the father than this person would like to say. You can't just keep adding butter because the kid wants more butter.
Well, I don't understand how you can possibly make the argument that a child's size is not the parent's fault. And I'm going to give you an opposite example. Instead of the kid being really, really fat, let's imagine that the kid is severely underweight. Are we going to say that that's the parent's fault?
We're barring medical exemptions.
Right.
So, but I think that's a really good point.
Like, just answer the question. If a kid's severely underweight and they don't have some kind of like weird medical condition, would we say that a kid being severely underweight is the parent's fault?
Yeah. Why are you not feeding this kid? I think is what most people would ask you. This kid needs to eat some food. He's going to be malnourished. He's not going to grow correctly.
I would agree.
So right.
If we can do it one way, why can't we do it the other and say you're giving your kid access to too many foods with low nutrition and high calories that are high in sugar and high in fat, and the kid is overweight and this is going to cause health problems down the line? It's arguably as bad or worse than being underweight.
Yeah, arguably worse, I think.
And I don't know the science on it, but if you see a kid that looks like they're starving, then you're going to say, why isn't the parent feeding this kid?
But I think we both agree, and we disagree with the author, that a child's body size is within the control of the parents to a great degree. Not to 100%. Maybe I would say to the 70th percent.
Sure.
All right. Next is she's upset that fertility clinics have BMI cutoffs. And she's saying that science doesn't support that. And this is, and then she goes on to say that, just because heavier people have a more difficult time and effectively a lower rate of fertility, that they have cutoffs. Well, and that it's not necessarily unhealthy for larger people to carry pregnancy. But I think that it was kind of, if she's saying that larger people can't carry babies and lose more babies, then I think she's kind of answering her own question, basically, or she's
here's the thing,
counteracting the point that she's making.
I think the reason why a fertility clinic would have a BMI cutoff is, and you can ask any surgeon this, operating on a fat person, on an obese person, is far more difficult than operating on a person that is normal weight, because you have a tremendous amount of vascular tissue that you need to cut through to get to whatever you're operating on an obese person that just doesn't exist on a normal weight person. And so, pregnancy is an inherently dangerous thing at any weight whatsoever. It's inherently dangerous. And so, if there are any complications during that pregnancy, if you are obese, you're going to have a much harder time treating them. And so the fertility clinics are kind of hedging that risk and saying, if you're above a certain BMI, this is too risky for us to allow you to do, because if we help you get pregnant and then there are complications, then you might turn around and sue us and say it was medically irresponsible for us to let you get pregnant when all these risks were present.
I mean, I think also fertility clinics have one goal, and that's to have more fertile people have more children. So I don't think that they're working. I don't think that they're just against larger people or obese people. I think the health effects are their primary concern. And she's saying that the science doesn't support that, but I don't know where she's getting her science, or just ignorance to science. Let's see.
So Diana Jerez Ortiz says sometimes it's completely genetic. I have a friend who's 5'3" and eats almost double the amount of calories I do, and is significantly skinnier than me. So we're not talking about whether not genetics play a role. They certainly do. However, if you look at trends over the last 40 years, you can see that across, on a population level, overweight and obese people have drastically grown in proportion to normal weight people, and genetics just don't change that fast. So yes, you can have individual examples of genetically predisposed to a higher or lower metabolism, but on a population level, genetics have not changed significantly in 40 years, yet the statistics of incidence of overweight and obese people very much have.
So, and just to reiterate, what you're saying is that overweight people have increased over the last 40 years, and genetics feasibly cannot change that quickly.
Nowhere near.
It takes at minimum several generations, and oftentimes hundreds of generations, for genetics to change that much.
Yeah, in a meaningful way. Yeah.
So let's look at this. Can I hit the next one, or you wanted to add something else, or hit a comment?
No.
Okay. No,
I better not.
Okay. Next up is 1 in 5 children and this is a wide range, from age 2 to 19 are affected by obesity, and that percentage went up during coronavirus. I thought that was a very telling sign that weights went up during coronavirus when everybody was locked inside. And even though coronavirus hasn't been known to transmit outside, we locked people in and closed parks and closed beaches.
I think it was more like you just don't want to have people interacting with strangers.
Yeah, I get it, but again, we hadn't seen any cases of it being transmitted outdoors. Next up is thin privilege.
Hold on.
And again, this is.
I want to hit this comment about pregnancy. Lisa says it's not only dangerous for the mother, but for the baby as well to be in the womb of an overweight person because the health conditions that develop, such as preeclampsia and gestational diabetes. So I don't know too much about that, but I'm going to trust that Lisa has done some research on that. Like preeclampsia is, I think that's something that affects the mother, where like the mother can have seizures, and gestational diabetes. So like if the mother is not eating well and has poor nutrition, that's shared with the developing baby.
In the medical field.
What?
I think Lisa works in the medical field. I could be wrong. I'm sure she'll let us know. And again, I want to make it very clear that we're not overweight or obese people. I just think that we're attempting to, again, and I prefaced with this, but we're just attempting to have a conversation. And this article, we're just kind of following the points of one article. That's all. And we can, if we have time left after we discuss this article, we can expand on it a little bit, maybe discuss our own opinions a little bit more. But right now we're discussing pregnancy. We're discussing whether a child's body weight is the responsibility of the parents or not, and if then who. And now we're about to talk about thin privilege. And
this ticks me off.
What she says is that thin people can walk into a store and find clothes while large people can't. And
first of all, that's bullshit.
Well, also, thin people oftentimes can't walk into stores and buy stuff because they are too thin for a lot of the clothes. The issue, things just like a car, they are built to the 95th percentile. It's ergonomics. It's built to fit the most people possible, which means that people on either end of the spectrum are going to be uncomfortable. And if you are on the far ends of the spectrum, you may not be able to ride. Just like when they build a roller coaster and it says you have to be 48 inches tall to join this roller coaster, it's not because they don't like short people. It's because short people, the roller coaster is only built one way. Okay.
It's like if you want to go skydiving, there's a weight limit. Not because they don't want fat people to go skydiving, it's because above a certain weight, the parachute won't fucking work.
So the difference is clothes can be made to fit more people, but the issue is that you have to produce clothes that sell. And a lot of places have expanded their clothing lineup.
Or you could go to a store that specializes in it.
Well, but I think the argument would be that thin people have privilege that they can shop at most stores, and that the fashion, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not quite as fashionable at some of the stores that are made.
Well, you should really just call it center of the bell curve privilege.
But that's what it is. It's center of the bell curve. And by the way, that's changing. I bought a whole bunch of shirts from shirts and underwear, by the way, from Uniqlo. And when I buy clothes, we were literally having this conversation right before we got on air. Rosh just said to me, "Oh, I see you're wearing the same thing that you were wearing last episode," which, by the way, is very difficult when I edit episodes because I can never tell which video is which episode. Luckily, James, you change your clothes, but I do wear the same thing every day. And I happened to one year buy 15 shirts and 15 pairs of underwear from Uniqlo. And then a year later, I was in Japan and I saw the same stuff. I didn't try it on. I just bought another 10 pairs because it was way cheaper in Japan because Uniqlo is a Japanese company. When I went
bought
home,
Asian sizes.
Exactly. When I went home and went to try this stuff on, it was literally half the size of American stuff. So I will tell you one thing, that the brands are accounting for larger people. It's just that they can only account for so many people, right? You have to have clothes that will sell. So we're moving in that direction. We're definitely moving in that direction where we're accounting for larger people, but only to so much of an extent. And just like you like, look, if you made a car to fit small people and big people, how would that work?
Well, the seats slide.
The seat goes back and forth. That's for sure.
Let me tell you something. So when I had the Miata, right? Mm-hmm. Tiny car. So I had the seat in the Miata slammed all the way back because at 6 foot tall, like that was how far back I needed to be able to like comfortably operate the pedals. Like if I was 6'6", I don't know if I could have driven the Miata.
I can't hear. have to. You got to pause. I don't know if you're gonna hear me. I can't.
Oh
hear
yeah,
you.
your internet's bad, but yeah. All right, I was talking about having the Miata and how I had to have the seat all the way back. And it's just because it was a small car, like, and like. Here's the one that really bothers me. They talk about sitting on an airplane and being able to buckle the seatbelt. So, like, if you're so fat that you can't buckle an airplane seatbelt, like, that should be a wake-up call. That, hey, maybe I need to do something about my health. Or maybe you have to buy 2 seats. And I don't feel bad about people having to buy 2 seats if they're too big.
Up. You're breaking up. You're breaking up quite a bit here. I don't know what I could change that.
It's better now, but it's spotty. It's your connection.
I literally missed everything that you just said about the Miata and about airplane seatbelts.
All right, so I'm just going to talk about the airplane seatbelts. I would first of all, you know how when was the last time you were on an airplane?
2 months ago, maybe.
Okay, yeah. So
April.
When you tighten the seatbelt to be, snug on your waist, how much extra material was there when you were done tightening the seatbelt? A foot?
Maybe 10 inches or so. I'm not as thin as you are.
Like I would say, if you can't tighten the seatbelt in an airplane seat, that should be a wake-up call. Of, hey, maybe I need to address something, or maybe you buy 2 seats. And I don't feel bad at all for someone that has to buy 2 seats, because, an airplane. What is an airplane selling? Effectively, they're selling space. They're selling space on that airplane for you. And if you're so fat that you take up somebody else's space because you're sliding over the armrest in your chair, then you're taking away space that somebody else paid for.
But we pay for space all over the place, right? Like if you're driving a tractor trailer or an RV and you go through a toll booth, you pay per axle. Mm-hmm. I don't think any other form of travel should be any different. And look, large people, we're not, and again, large and obese. We're kind of drawing a bit of a line here, but I get not being happy with the space on airplane seats, but it's not just you. I'm much bigger than James, but when I get on a plane, it sucks entirely all the time, unless I upgrade to business class or fake first class.
I'll say it even sucks for me because I'm a little bit taller than you.
But yeah.
I'm saying, even for me, being in a coach class airplane seat, you can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Anything?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying that even for me, being thinner than you are, and sitting in a coach seat, airplane seat, is really uncomfortable because I'm a little bit taller than you, so I'm fucking cramped too. It sucks for everybody, but it sucks even more if I get sat next to somebody that's taking up 1.5 seats.
It's a difficult conversation to have. I want everybody to be comfortable, but arguably not to the discomfort then of someone else. And I haven't assigned fault on why someone's overweight. I don't think at any point that you and I have said to each other, an overweight person can only blame themselves. And shame on them. I don't think we're saying that. I think we're just having a conversation about, just like we did about trans, when we're doing our best to have this conversation, just about kind of the reality of the situation. There's also, so you mentioned plane seats, but someone complaining about restaurant booths being too small. Now,
I bet they're not too small at the Cheesecake Factory.
I'm sure they're not. Cheesecake Factory is a huge. A plate at the Cheesecake Factory could be 3,000 calories.
Oh, easily.
And
I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't down 10,000 calories at a meal in Cheesecake Factory. Not that I've ever been.
I've been to a Cheesecake Factory maybe 3 or 4 times. I was very much overwhelmed. I would, I'm not a big fan of chain restaurants, but I would much rather go to an Applebee's than a Cheesecake Factory.
Really, they're that bad?
But they're just not that good. The food's not that good. And there's one. I think there's one in the mall that I have has a bunch of really lousy kind of chain restaurants in it. But the question is, imagine and just God, this is such a tough conversation to have. Take a very large obese person, put them at a restaurant booth, okay, and space that table and chair whatever distance they have to be apart from each other. And now I want you to place every other table and chair. And now I want you to affix the booths and the tables to the floor, just like in any other restaurant. You can't move the booth seats. They're just locked in place. Now I want you to take an average person and picture that person at that booth. Where are they fitting? Yeah, how are they sitting at that table? So the issue is just that we can't build everything for everyone. And this goes back to a certain acceptance level. Now, we do have, but also, by the way, people in wheelchairs aren't accommodated for in this scenario. So, we having we could, and I might be behind this, legislating a certain, especially for chain restaurants, maybe not so much mom and pops, but legislating that a certain number of tables have to be wheelchair or disabled accessible.
Well, pretty much all tables are.
I mean, it's a table, but not the ones that are affixed in a booth, right? Like that could be a little tougher. But I don't think that, and what I'm getting at is I don't think that the world is designed against overweight and obese people because they hate overweight and obese people. I just think just kind of intrinsically, you design it for the most people possible.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I am going to say this. Like, at a certain level, and I'm not going to say where the line is because I don't actually know, but at a certain level of overweight or obesity, with the exception of certain medical conditions that are pretty rare, the vast majority of cases, if someone is obese, it is their fault to a large degree.
Well, I think that's what we ignore a lot is that we don't. Here's the issue: is that we've completely erased the accountability factor of being overweight. That's all. I'm not saying that there are other factors that are causing people to be overweight and that literally the world is out to get them. But what I'm saying is that having a conversation where we completely ignore the personal accountability factor, and literally the next sentence, I just want to finish this article. I'll read you the next sentence, and I think it speaks exactly to what I'm saying. What the author says, and I'll repeat the author's name, Virginia Soul Smith of the Burnt Toast podcast. What she says is she doesn't think people should say things like junk food or bad food or garbage or even real food. People shouldn't say real food versus treats, that it's all real food, that treats are also part of a meal. Which
I mean, there's some truth to that. Is like you could have a dessert as part of a meal, but it's recognizing that some foods are going to have more of an effect on your weight than others. That to ignore that fact is just dangerous.
But and I think this person is such on the extreme end, and it's wild that this person would be showcased on Fresh Air on NPR. Because NPR seems to be taking this ever so left perspective on everything.
There's some things in the interview. She made some points that were actually reasonable that this article doesn't touch on. And she talked about a study where they had two groups of kids, right? And the meal was some kind of a soup and then a dessert. And in group one, the kids were told you have to finish your soup before you can have the dessert. And in group two, the kids were allowed to have as much of the soup as they wanted, and then they could have as much of the dessert as they wanted. And what they found was that the kids who weren't told you must finish your soup actually had more of the soup because they weren't being forced to do it. And so, there's a certain behavioral aspect here where, legislating things too hard mandating things to kids too much, kids are kind of naturally defiant. And so, like, you have to play some reverse psychology with kids a little bit and just saying, like, you must finish all of your vegetables before you can have dessert. Well, what if they're not super hungry and they only eat half their vegetables? Like, let them have a little bit of dessert. That's not harmful. But letting kids eat exclusively dessert and saying, well, it's food. It's like there's no such thing as bad food, so they can just have Cheetos and ice cream all the time. That's irresponsible.
But yeah, well, and that's wait until we get to the next paragraph. But I've always thought it was funny that we said you must consume all of the food, meaning all of the calories on your plate, and then you can have dessert. I always thought it was a funny approach to parenting.
Well, yeah, it is.
So, all right. So the last thing that she says is, if you start to take a more relaxed approach and let these foods be part of your family's life, make sure your kids have regular access to them, and you don't judge how many cookies they take. You let it play out. You will see that these foods become these foods are foods your kids can enjoy, but in a much less fraught way. You'll find there are some that they actually don't even like that much. And they're leaving a few left in the bag in the pantry, and they're not touching it for several weeks. Or they might be excited to see it a few days after the novelty wears off. It's a completely different way of engaging with food. I think that's one of the pieces of this that feels the most radical to a lot of folks. It's a level of permission we've never given ourselves. But I think here's the issue, is that if you just have Oreos available all the time and soda available all the time, and you don't say anything to your kids like this is worse for you than drinking milk or drinking water, that the kids aren't going to learn that Oreos should not replace a meal. I think she's actually taking a radical approach.
Well, what she's doing, she's equivocating. Because, like, kids, by their very nature, lack the self-control that adults have. And so if you make these foods kind of freely available, like, the kids might just only eat those and never develop a palate for more nutritious food. And so, if you want, I don't have an issue with making these foods freely available to kids. Like, if you have a house and you've got, like, Oreos and all sorts of other, like, kind of junk food around and letting the kids have free access to it, fine. But it has to come with education to the kids about what's nutrition and what effect different foods will have on your body. And you can do that at any age.
But I think that's what it comes down to, is an awareness of nutrition and how it works, and she says you can't say there's good foods and bad foods and real foods and treats. But I think there are. But I think that
your body responds very differently to different types of food.
I mean, just think about how your body responds to meat and vegetables versus sugary, starchy foods.
Well, this is something that you can measure. Like, you can do blood tests and see the insulin response based on what kind of food you ate. Your body has a very different reaction to different foods, and for a reason.
But here's my point, and this is why I wanted to bring this up in this episode, is that no one else, except very specialty, very niched podcasts or whatever, are having conversations about this. No one else is having a conversation about food. In my office all the time, we're talking about healthy foods and things like that. I don't see that playing out on any public platforms, and it's not good. And I wanted this podcast to address healthy foods and obesity in a supportive way, a non-discriminatory way, and just to be introducing that topic. And not everybody else is having it, and I think that it's a good thing that we did. What are your thoughts? We got 90 seconds left.
It's something that there's so much bullshit flying around on both sides of this one that it's hard to have an honest conversation, because there are points that you're going to make that are going to piss off both sides that are correct. And the fat acceptance movement is just normalizing unhealthy behavior. On the other side of the argument, like, trying to shame fat people doesn't work. And so, like, criticizing people for being fat as a complete moral failing isn't going to accomplish the goal that you think you're going to have. And so it comes down to you have to encourage people to make good choices, and that comes through education of letting them understand, because there's lots of people I know that like are somewhat clueless about what the foods they're doing, like eating, are actually doing to their body.
Well said. I want to thank everybody for joining. This is the end of the episode. We will see you guys next time. Adios. All right, that concludes this episode. Let me know how we did. Did we piss anybody off? Did we piss you off? Did we follow that center line right down the line? Yeah, I don't know, but I'm curious your opinion. Let me know in the comments.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.